The Guam Legislature is back in session. When we broke, we were on Resolution 234. I think I'll start this all over again and just ask the original the main sponsor to remake his motion and hopefully... Correct. Thank you. Senator McCready, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize for the confusion earlier. I have an amended version of the Resolution 234, and I would like to make a motion to place that amended version on the floor and be accepted by this body.
Hearing no objection, Resolution 234 as amended by the sponsor is in third reading, and I will allow Senator McCready to discuss
and if
this.
the Sergeant at Arms would pass the substituted version around. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I stated earlier, I'll be really quick because I know there's some of my colleagues that have some great points and information to bring up. On September 25th, I introduced Resolution 234, which, if passed, would show the legislature's support of Guam's efforts to become a member of the Western Interstate Commissions for Higher Education, which is long for WICHE. WICHE is a multi-state commission made up of 15 Western states, with Guam, Cnmi, American Samoa, the Federated States of Micronesia, Palau, and the Marshall Islands collectively. And together we are all able to join as one. We make up the 16th member. WICHE has a number of programs and initiatives that have the potential to provide additional educational opportunities for our undergraduates and graduate students, and over 150 institutions of higher learning in hundreds of programs. Now, becoming a member of WICHE also has the possibilities of providing our college students significant savings on college tuition, which is why we are here this afternoon. For example, an undergraduate from Guam who manages to participate in WICHE's program would be eligible for 150 or no more than 150% off of the resident tuition rate. And I use this, I use the example of University of Hawaii. If you go to the University of Hawaii, not under the WICHE program, it costs about $28,000 a year for a non-resident. It costs about $9,000 a year for a resident. Under the WICHE program, it costs about $14,000 to $15,000 a year. So a huge savings, Mr. Speaker, and that's what my intention is. My intention is to just give an opportunity to students who have made their minds up to go off island for education. I believe that, and I thank the University of Guam and GCC for their excellent in sustaining higher education and for allowing our students to have a high education. I may end up sending my son to University of Guam, all three of my sons, and maybe my daughter, if that's what they choose. This is just an option in case students, when they graduate from high school, decide to go off island and get an education, and their parents might not be able to afford the full tuition. This would help them realize the dream of higher education off island at a lower price. So I ask my colleagues to support, and you know, I look forward to their discussion on this matter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator McCready. Senator Yamashita, then Speaker Wampat. Any other senator after that? Thank you. Senator Yamashita.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak on resolution number 234-32. Mr. Speaker, I stand in full support of this resolution. While I am certainly very proud of the growth of the University of Guam and the growth of Guam Community College, both of which my family was very close to in helping develop. I also realized the value of being able to go off island. I had the fortune of being supported as I went to school off island, and I know that many of us have. I also know that many would like to, but they don't have the financial support to be able to do that. And so when I heard about WICHE, which actually has been around since 1950, and my mom actually had the WICHE catalog from 1968, and we were discussing it. At that time, the University of Guam decided not to participate. And when Senator McCready first raised this, we looked into it as an opportunity. Now, I've had a few email correspondences with President Underwood, and a few email correspondences and conversations with President Okada. Their first concerns with the original resolution was that it did not give them the opportunity to take the ball and run with it. They wanted to take this, make it theirs, have, of course, the trustees and the regents support it or not support it, endorse it or not endorse it, and move from there. So one of the biggest changes that the author of this resolution did was to ensure that that this has to have the concurrence and support with the University of Guam Board of Regents and the Guam Community College Board of Trustees. And that's found on page 2 in the, starting on line 21. And so that was big, and I know specifically President Okada was very happy to hear that. She certainly wanted to be able to say that they're taking the lead. They didn't want to be led by any other jurisdiction around us, and I appreciate her stance on that leadership position. The other big concern that the two presidents had was that we shouldn't be that we shall be supporting local by saying that WICHE could support for those programs that are not found at the University of Guam or Guam Community College. And again, the author of this resolution amended it so that involvement or support, engagement of WICHE shall only be for programs that we don't find on our island. And I think that is smart, and I think it's strategic. And so this is helpful for those of our kids who want to go off island. And I find more and more, well, during my time, a lot of us went to the East Coast. Today, a lot of the kids who choose to go off island stay on the West Coast, which I find is interesting. And then I find that a lot of our kids go for one semester and then they come home. And so I think everything's changing in life. And but for those who have the courage and the confidence, going off island certainly for me widens the learning experience, but it also grows the appreciation for Guam. It is only when you're away from Guam do you really appreciate what we're always about. And perhaps as the regents and the trustees go through this process, and if they decide to support and become a member, hopefully they will enact the rules and regulations that say if you go through this program, then you shall come home for the same number of years at least. That used to be one of the rules, and we had ProTech. I'm not sure how alive or how active ProTech is these days, but I remember that, and I thought it was a good mechanism to bring our students back. And it's certainly, as I read, that we have 147,000 Guamanians living across the country. Anything that we can do to bring folks home, I think, is what we really need to do. And so, Mr. Speaker, I stand in support of this resolution. It will give it to the University of Guam president and his regents and the Guam Community College president and her trustees to review, to support, to determine. And it certainly says that it will be only for programs that are not found on their campuses, and it will give the opportunity for families to support their children in their academic growth off island. I'm sorry. Thank you.
The speaker was having problems hearing herself speak. Please. Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to, I'm changing this around now, but I want to commend the efforts of the author in wanting to identify more opportunities for people to access higher education. But at the same time, I just want to make sure is that we do not force, the membership into the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, which is WICHE, unless we are certain that it will be beneficial for our island's post-secondary institutions. Now, I have the same conversations as my colleagues as well regarding the original language, which was basically to kind of force our higher institutions into doing. Into participating in this, and which it works very well, primarily in the states. And I say this because and the contiguous states, because it'll be easy to go from one place to the other, and because there's really more of a balance exchange of students who are crossing the state borders for education. But when you think of us here in Guam, I mean, you can see it both ways. One is that the distance in which we would have to travel, and whether that would be beneficial to them or more beneficial to us. And I share this because the exchange may not be equally beneficial, and I say this as well because at one time the University of Guam had an agreement similar to what we have here with WICHE, but it was just primarily between the University of Guam and the University of Hawaii, that where our students would travel to Hawaii, go to school at UH, would pay resident fees rather than out-of-state fees. And they have the same arrangement that any one of their students can come to Guam as well and be able to take courses at UOG at the residence fee. What Hawaii realized that it wasn't benefiting them at all, because it was us, yes, having to travel the distance to attend university, and especially, you're right, in areas where the university does not offer some of these courses at the University of Guam. So what happened as a result of that, the University of Hawaii had discontinued then that understanding now with the university, and now here we are having to pay then the same as every other place our children go to, the out-of-state, resident tuition, out-of-state tuition. And I should know that because my son graduated and daughter from the University of Hawaii, and one's attending right now and is paying out-of-state tuition. So that then basically, would show how unequal the benefit, it is for us. What I'm really concerned too, but yet I do know that the dues, membership dues for Guam, should Guam decide to join, is going to be half the amount of the $130,000, which is $65,000. And I know that Cnmi, who is right now the only member who are participating in WICHE from the western side, is paying basically the full amount. So as more of the other islands decide to come on board, then that amount could conceivably be reduced. However, there is also an agreement, and that's the reason why a lot of these universities from even Hawaii, especially Hawaii, has actually been going into the other islands throughout Micronesia, FSM, and the others, and are offering them not just even resident tuitions, but even offering scholarships, and more importantly, are doing distance learning with their colleges there, trying to capture the students in Micronesia. And of course, that then negatively impacts us because, as we all know, many of the leaders right now of FSM and past leaders of FSM and throughout Micronesia and the other independent states are graduates all of the University of Guam. And, and we're proud of that fact, and they're proud of the fact that they are graduates of UOG, but the potential is there. And that's why these universities realize that that's, a pot of gold out there, because they know that it'll be difficult for them then to get other students, because they're competing with every university in the United States. But to go to a place where there aren't any higher education, higher institution, that they are now appealing to them. And so, and that, is the main concern. And I'm glad, of course, that the resolutions have switched now to asking them, that we're going to wait for them to be able to say that they are ready to do this, because then ultimately, when it comes to the legislature to say that as a government we want to do this, we have to be ready then to pay these dues, and these dues are on an annual basis. So that means $65,000 every year right now if we decide to do this. I know that Dr. Robert Underwood's concern, and in his written testimony, is that, there are a lot of, that we've put a lot of resources into our post-secondary education, and that, he pointed out that 70% of UOG graduates' work, is in our region. However, this is the things that's disturbing, that 2/3 of the students who leave island for college never come back. So we have to ask ourselves then, by saying we want to be a full member of WICHE, which makes, of course, education in off-island institutions more affordable, how is that going to affect the brain drain? We always talk about that. And in the wisdom of past legislatures, that when we wanted to try to recruit from within, we try to support from within, and what we want to do is and that's why the past legislatures have offered tuition-free, have offered scholarships, to be able to try to keep our students here, to keep those students who will not leave the island otherwise to get an education, because we're finding out 2/3 of them don't come back, and we want them to stay here, and that's why now we've done, that's a very large portion of the budget that we give to the University of Guam, to be able then to keep our students here. So that is one concern I have, but of course the author has admitted that it's not so much for the university, for the Guam legislature to say, yes, I accept it, we want Guam to join, and that's it. It's now left up to the two institutional presidents to decide, whether they want to enter. Interestingly enough, I had attended, of course, a symposium, I suppose, by the National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreements, and for short they call themselves SARA, and that too, what they've done is they work, yes, very closely with WICHE, and what they're trying to do, because they're starting to see this throughout the United States, our institutions coming into their states and wanting to get a hold of their students, to get their students to take courses with their universities, but they're not really having a permanent structure or license to even be there at their particular state. And, that's a problem we talked about. And so I had asked this question, then I said that, because one of the things they're really looking at, that they want to have a uniform policy, is online or distance learning, and I know that's something we've always been asking our university to participate in, but we also know that many other universities are coming into Guam, taking, our students, of course, and rightfully so. I understand why, because we're not really offering, doctoral programs, and that's where many of these students are actually looking to attend this distance learning, courses with universities out of the island. And that one of the suggestions that they came up with, the council came up with, is that, for Guam to consider, of course, doing exactly what they would like to do with all the other states. And so we're having that communication now to actually draft legislation to be able to capture those monies that, should really stay here in Guam, rather than have to go off island for even for distance learning. And I know that this is great in the sense that we're giving our students opportunity to, go to other universities, especially for courses that our university does not offer. And I know that this is all going to take some time for the university to grow and provide these opportunities for our own students. But so the bottom line, of course, is that now looking at the new language in which we are not saying to the university that you must participate and be a member of WICHE, because ultimately when you are a member of WICHE, then all the other regions as well that are listed that really would end up falling under the National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreements, what they would do is to work with all these regional organizations such as WICHE, MHEC, NEBHE, and SREB. Those are the 4 regional compacts, WICHE being one of them, that eventually all fall under SARA. And when you do that, there's another, again, membership fees that we would also have to pay to that council to be a part of that council to benefit from the uniform agreements that they're going to have throughout the entire United States who are in these regional compacts. So long as the resolution does not mandate, of course, of course it can't, but I just don't want it where we're going to kind of force them. And I was wondering that looking at the language on page 3, and that always concerns me, is the resolve clause. That means what is it that we may say, oh, this whereas in terms of what it is that actually exists, what we've seen in our research, what we know. But the most important thing is the resolve clause, and where it says that the legislature does hereby support the government of Guam's efforts to become active members of the Western with WICHI, and further urges the government of Guam to work with WICHI to cement this status. And what to me this is saying is that it's already like a done deal. And I prefer that the resolve clause instead be that we resolve that the higher institution, education institutions of Guam, that they, through their board, really must so support first, and that they then will come to the legislature with that resolution of support to then become a part of WICHI.
Is that a motion to amend?
Yes. No, that clause there is just saying who we want to give copies to. It's the resolve clause on 5 to 9 or 5 to 8, which says that and instead of using that language that here we are in the legislature saying that we support the government to move forward to become an active member, and that we also are saying we want the government to work with them to cement, meaning to say that we are going to be a member, that instead that we put it around the other way, that we want the two higher institutions for their board to pass a resolution, as the mover of this resolution said, that for them then to pass a resolution in support of being a member, that instead comes down to the legislature for the legislatures then, passing legislation to say that that's where we're going. We want to hear from them first before we do that. Okay. Well, that's my amendment.
Point of information, Mr. Speaker, is the WICHI mandate is not mandated for the institution to accept. The mandate from WICHI is a resolution from the legislature, and then that resolution goes to the governor. In an effort to compromise with some common sense, put a amendment in there to then offer a third leg of this process to the institutions, so as we do not dictate policy to University of Guam or GCC, because they have the Board of Regents and trustees to do that. So I offered that as an amendment because that was the pushback. Now, the WICHI, I want to be very careful with this amendment. I want to work with my colleagues, but I won't amend something that doesn't mandate the WICHI. I don't want to put a poison pill in this resolution by doing something that is not required from WICHI. The requirement from WICHI is to go through the legislature first and foremost, and to get an approval by the governor. There is no qualifying the institution. I put that amendment in there so we could all work together. So if we're going to supersede WICHI's mandates, then I think it's kind of counterproductive. Why not just pull the bill? Or pull the resolution? Because we're saying, we're telling WICHI that, yeah, we want to be members, but if we do it our way, not your way. But, we have to do it the way they want it mandated. And the way that is going through the legislature with a resolution. That's why we're here. So, I would object to anything that kind of sways from the mandate of WICHI. And I want to stay in the path and navigate this through the legislature, through the higher institution, and then through the governor. I think anything less than that, we would probably be in violation, and this resolution would mean nothing. Thank you.
Madam Speaker?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think I need to clarify this more. What my amendment is not to mandate anything for Wichita. We have no control, of course, of anything outside of ourselves here. So I'm not going to, my amendment is not to reach out to them and mandate for them that they, accept us to become a member of Wichita. My mandate, my amendment to this resolution is exactly what he just said, is to add that third leg. And that third leg is the institution, the higher education institution. For them to pass a resolution saying that they want to become active members of higher ed, but that resolution be sent to the legislature, then the legislature then will pass a resolution then to the government, or say we as a government, not really the governor, because the Organic Act was amended to take the governor out of education, that it is now the government. So government was substituted for governor. So the governor is not going to be the one to say, okay, UOG and GCC, you are now, through my executive order, whatever it is, now you're going to be a part of WICHI. Because the legislature is going to have to now appropriate then $65,000 every year to maintain our membership in this. And in the meeting that I had mentioned that I attended last year with the National Council for State Authorization Reciprocity Agreements, SARA for short, basically said that that meeting that they had was specifically for legislators because they know that this would have to be a mandate from the legislature. That's what I'm saying. I'm adding them to be a part of the process in making a decision, them making a decision, telling us they want to become a member, and then we, through legislation and appropriation, and sending it to WICHI, saying we want to become a member of WICHI, our institution.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, could we get an amendment so we could debate something? We're just
I
going
believe
back
she
and
did.
forth.
We'll take a
There's a
short
concept
recess and
on the
get a
table.
written amendment.
Thank you very
Legislature's
much.
back in session.
Thank you, Mr.
Madam
Speaker.
Speaker.
In reading the resolution, there is a whereas on page 2, the last whereas on page 2, from 21 to 25, that really doesn't belong there. That's a resolve clause. So what I want to do in my amendment then is to delete, first of all, is to take that completely out of there and to make it a resolve clause, but not the whole thing, only part of it. So the amendment will be, is to delete the word whereas. You follow me? Okay. Most important is, clerk, you delete whereas, and then you start with the lines, and that becomes, instead of a whereas, it becomes a resolve, with the concurrence and support, with a resolution to the legislature, then continue on in the language here, from the University Board of Regents and the Guam Community College Board of Trustees, Guam's participation in WICHI, period. Then the rest to delete, and then somebody else is going to do something with that. But I just wanted to make sure that that is no longer a resolve, a whereas clause, and that becomes a new resolve clause.
On the WANPAD amendment, any senator wish to be heard on it? Senator Nicholas on the WANPAD amendment?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to address the amendment because the way I'm reading it, I'm not quite. It kind of just leaves it hanging. So the way it will be resolved with the concurrence and support with the resolution of the legislature from the University of Guam Board of Regents and the Guam Community College Board of Trustees, Guam's participation in WICHI. Period. Right? Yeah, I want to correct it. So if I may make an amendment to the amendment.
Please.
Guam's participation in WICHI shall be considered by y legislatura en Guahan.
Senator McCready?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So my question, if the amender to the amendment would yield, are we saying that we're going to send this resolution to the education institutions? They're going to send it back to us to re-adopt it? Because right now what we're saying is, can you be more clear, please? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, if I may. Okay, so what we're saying right now, without my adjustment, is we're saying that we're waiting. We are asking for a resolution from the Board of Regents and from the Board of Trustees of GCC and UOG. When they send us a resolution saying they want to participate in WICHI, that's pretty much the First Amendment. That we're asking them to send us a resolution saying that they want to participate in WICHI. What I'm just adding there is that when we receive that amendment, that resolution, we will thereafter consider their desire to be a member of WICHI. And the reason why that's necessary is because, as the speaker pointed out earlier, WICHI membership does have a fee. And so when they say in their resolution that UOG or GCC that they want to participate and it comes back to us and they tell us that, then it'll be time for us to take action. Okay, GCC wants to do this. Let's go find the money now to make sure that we pay the fee for the membership. So after their boards or their individual board indicates that they do want to participate as WICHI members, that resolution will come back to us with my amendment to thereafter consider how we're going to identify the funding to pay for the membership.
I support that, but I'm just saying, do we now, when that comes back to us for adoption, do we reintroduce a resolution, or how are we going to resolve the membership to WICHI? How are we going to become members, and how is this body going to then say that we accept the findings of the institution? What are we going to do? Are we going to make another resolution, or are we going to pass a bill? How are we going to format that when it comes back to this body?
One would assume that we would have to pass a resolution. Yes, and then make sure that we have it in the budget. But the problem that you have is that this substituted version has this premature resolution going to the president of WICHI already. and we haven't decided whether or not we are going or...
Could I suggest from the amender or the proper of the second amendment, if he could put a timeline on the findings from the higher education back to the legislature?
Let's take a short recess. Let's try this again. Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In consultation with the author of the resolution, I would like to further refine the language for my amendment to the amendment.
Please.
The language will include the initial amendment of the Speaker, but I would like to make an amendment to the amendment which reads, after the word shall on line 23, shall be transmitted to Legislatura en Guam within 30 days of adoption for consideration. And so, if passed, my amendment to the amendment will have the final language read, resolved with the concurrence and support with the resolution to the legislature from the University of Guam Board of Regents and the Guam Community College Board of Trustees, Guam's participation in WICHE shall be transmitted to Legislatura en Guam within 30 days of adoption for consideration.
On the amendment, with the amendment by Senator Nicholas, any senator wish to be heard? As a resolve clause, it started out with a resolve. No objection? Anything further? On the main motion?
I made the amendment and then he discussed my amendment. Thank you very much, my colleague, for amending it. I just, the last thing basically that I wanted to share with everyone, the fact that it is a $65,000 fee to participate, to be a member of WICHI. And UOG had sent me some, I asked actually what, taking the per credit hour of $190 and having students go at a full-time, is that technically with the $65,000 is that we could give free tuition to 14 students every year and keep the students here on the island. One other information that's also important to note is that because SARA is the umbrella organization of the regional compacts, that SARA also charges every institution who then become a part of WICHI, and then they fall under SARA, that there is, depending on the number of students in our institutions, if it's under 2,500, there's a $2,000 charge again to the institution for participation again under SARA. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Snickles, did you wish to speak on the main motion, and then Senator Duenas, then Senator Abbott, then Senator Morrison?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is another item that I'm currently working out, but I would like to address something that I'm pretty clear on. On page 3, lines 11 and 12. In that resolve section of this resolution, we are transmitting this resolution to David A. Longenecker, President of the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. Now, I'm kind of hesitant about us transmitting this resolution to them, because what's pending is first the resolutions from GCC and UOG, and I don't want to lose any face for us to say we're sending this to them and then for them to come back and say that they have issues and they're not interested. So I would like to make an amendment on page 3, lines 11 and 12, after the word to strike out from the name David to the last word education on line 12, semicolon.
On that amendment? Hearing no objection. Thank you.
And then 2 other amendments, just for formality's sake. I would like to amend on line 13 to add doctor in front of the name Robert Underwood.
Hearing no objection.
And then also doctor in front of the name Mary Okada on the same line.
Hearing no objection.
And Mr. Speaker, may I request a brief recess, please?
Thank you. The legislature's back in session. Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a little bit more adjustments so that we make sure that we tighten up the language to everybody's satisfaction. I rise in support of the resolution, by the way. I think it's a great idea. So on page 3, lines 1 through 4, we're going to make some additional adjustments here. On line 2, strike the words "whichy to accept." And then on line 3, if I may go through it because these are all going to affect the same paragraph for it to read entirely differently. On line 3, we're going to strike from the word the commission, all the way to the end of line 4. And then we're going to insert new language. After the word "in," we're going to insert "whichy," as in W-I-C-H-E. And then also the language to read, to offer programs that are not currently offered at either the University of Guam or the Guam Community College. So altogether, that new section will read, whereas the Pt.1 de la Legislature in Guam supports and encourages Guam's efforts to join the Cnmi as the second territory to actively participate in WICHE, to offer programs that are not currently offered at either the University of Guam or Guam Community College.
Thank you very much. On that amendment, no objection. Senator Duenas.
Buenas tardes, and Sedus Moasi, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise in support, I guess, of Resolution 234-32. During the recess, Mr. Speaker, I encouraged my colleague, maybe in endeavors such as this, to accumulate maybe an additional 8 or 9 co-sponsors. Maybe most of this could have been vetted by email. Notwithstanding that, I also would say probably perhaps there could have been additional verbiage or remarks in the legislative intent or the resolution's intent, because I'm not going to say that this is not a good idea still at this point, Mr. Speaker. In fact, it may generate a lot more work with the good author to sit down in a meeting, perhaps with the Board of Regents, with trustees, and, really have a heart-to-heart on really what we're endeavoring to do here, Mr. Speaker. I listened intently to a lot of the comments, particularly by our good speaker. And the one thing that I'd like to bring to light is the fact that a couple of things she mentioned were really true and very important, and a lot of us feel that way in terms of our children who go off to school in the States and eventually, do stay. And unfortunately, we all want them to come home. I have a son in San Francisco. I hope that he comes home someday after his schooling and being successful in terms of the companies he's worked for. But I would just say, Mr. Speaker, with the content of this resolution, and I'm just going to make 2 points. The good speaker in the last session introduced legislation that provided for opportunities for doctors to come back to Guam, knowing that the biggest expense of course, medical school and law school and other technical schools and professions such as that is the expense. And we all know that on Guam, we're still continuing as a young democracy and as part of, as we talked about, even with your bill, Mr. Speaker, with regard to Research Corporation of the University of Guam, I always believe fundamentally that every Chamorro, as Jay Rojas has pointed out in his map, the 175,000 Guamanians, Chamorros, those who claim Guam as their heritage, deep in their heart, and you see it on Facebook all the time, in terms of how much they miss Guam, especially after they come back in vacation and then go back. Guam will always be a part of their life, and they will always have a part of them that wants to be here. It's our job, Mr. Speaker, to continue to try and help and expand the opportunities, the economy, and the quality of life on Guam to make sure that that's what attracts our families to come back home. You know, those are the opportunities that they see, with a new hospital coming online, with a research corporation at the University of Guam that should spur other economic opportunities and more businesses, with foreign investment coming to Guam, with Asia Tigers continuing to rise, that regionally it just makes more sense to be here. You know, to me, Mr. Speaker, I want to continue to endeavor every day that I have to work in the legislature with you and others is to continue to make that Guam that we all want our families and our loved ones to come back and live with us. Mr. Speaker, I guess in closing, when I looked at this and some constituents, parents, and others that I've talked to that heard about this opportunity, I thought of them, even those, Mr. Speaker, who are of means. With college tuition in the United States now, most U.S. schools, you know, Mr. Speaker, it's incredibly expensive. These young people, Mr. Speaker, that I think would be taking advantage of this, they're already going to probably be going to school in the mainland. And then not only the kids with means, Mr. Speaker, but every year, as we talked about when we were talking about your research corporation bill, Mr. Speaker, every year, despite the conditions in schools, we have valedictorians and salutatorians that continue to blow us away when they make their speeches, when all those public schools graduate up there at the university, and many of those kids, in fact, I think it was the Simon Sanchez valedictorian that actually came from Saipan first and down to here. The parents relocated, and she was crying with her twin sister as they were both going off to the mainland and had received scholarships. But even with those scholarships, Mr. Speaker, some of the other mid-level children that are doing and worked just as hard with those other kids, I don't know. Most of those parents are just, pulling their hair out. I don't have any left. But, I'm thinking, how are they going to do this? But knowing that their kids have that opportunity to realize that dream, I love the University of Guam, and I personally think, especially with the programs that we have with regard to marine biology, we're one of the greatest in the world as far as I'm concerned. But there are other specialties and other things that our kids are so qualified to avail themselves of. I want them back home, but I want them to shine in the United States of America too. And if we can do something, anything, to defray that cost. And in closing, Mr. Speaker, I've heard it said time and time again, not only by the current president, but other presidents of the University of Guam, and especially this president, stay here, start here, knowing that an articulation to higher education for many of those kids may be, after a year or two, to a mainland college. But many of those who will go and do that because they have the intelligence, the acumen, the God-given gift to strive, thrive, and succeed in a mainland inclusive of Ivy League colleges, God bless them. And that makes Guam shine just as much as anything else. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to work with my colleague to compel our good friends up there at the university and GCC to really embrace the opportunity here that most of these kids probably would be attending those schools anyways, and to continue to show Guam's ability educationally and to reach for the stars, the moon, and every other thing in the sky. But we will empower them to have that opportunity and show that our university, our education, public and private here, produces some of the most brilliant people in the world right here from our little island of Guam. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to speak in support of what's left of the intent of 234-32. And I think that we will eventually have a final resolution, come back to this body, hold hands, kumbaya, sing happy birthday once again to our good colleague, and just do what is right for our children and for our families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Dueñas. Senator Tom Addy, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, I rise in support of any effort to facilitate the attainment of a higher education for our young folks. But aside from that now, I just want to get into some of the more, I guess, closer reading of the resolution itself, and maybe if the author of the resolution will yield. On page 2, lines 16 through 20, it reads there, whereas WICHE has already included Guam, the Commonwealth, and then lists all the other Micronesian islands as the collective 16th member of WICHE. And it is now contingent on Guam to decide to actively participate in WICHE. So if the author could yield and clarify, does that mean that everybody else in Micronesia has signed on and we are the last one to come on board?
Thank you. Yes, I do. If I may just kind of navigate this. The Cnmi was the first one to actually join WICHE. The other surrounding islands have not joined, including Guam. But combined, there's a $130,000 membership fee for WICHE, and we, with the 6 different islands, become one. So we become the 16th body. Now, there has been some interest in other islands joining WICHE, but for reasons unknown to me, they haven't joined. So no, the question is Guam would be the second one, and I believe Yap might be the third one, or the Marshall Islands might be the third one that wants to join. So to answer your question, right now Cnmi is the only one who participates in this program.
Thank you. So it appears that statement then on page 2, line 19, starting at line 19 at the end, it says, it is now contingent on Guam to decide to actively participate in WICHE. That is kind of deceiving because that statement alone makes it seem like everybody else is on board. We're the last guys that this whole thing is waiting on. So if I understand this whereas clause, this whereas clause is simply explaining that the Micronesian region is the 16th member, would be the 16th member of WICHE once everybody gets on board, and that we should strike out, and it is now contingent on Guam to decide, because it is not just us. We could join today, and the Micronesian region as a 16th member will still not be in the game. So based on that, Mr. Speaker, I would move that we, on page 2, that whereas, which starts on line 16, that should end on line 19 after the word education, to place a period there and strike out everything else.
If I understand correctly, the 16th member includes all 6 of us.
Correct.
And there will always be a 16th member, whether or not it's one country or all 6 of us. We will only make the 16th member.
No.
As a set.
Yes. So
there isn't really no need to strike this, because we do have to decide whether or not we're going to be one of the 6 that's going to become the 6th part of the 16th member.
Yeah, but the statement says that and it is now contingent on Guam to decide to actively. So it just doesn't make. I mean, the way I interpret that is that all the other Micronesian islands, including the Cnmi, are on board, and it is just us now to complete that collective unit. Unless I guess if Cnmi is the only one that's a member right now, are they paying the full 165? 130? They are? Okay, well, I mean, if that's the case, fine. I'll be willing to withdraw my amendment if, in fact, we don't need to draw it. But then I also have another question: is that who's trying to convince who? First of all, it seems that if the legislature is going to get involved, it should be at the behest of GCC and UOG for us to pass a resolution expressing the will of the people of Guam to become a member of WICHI. But then after we've passed the resolution, it seems that we, instead of sending it to the UOG president or to the GCC president, it seems that we should be sending it to APIL, we should be sending it to the Post-Secondary Association in Micronesia to get them to persuade the powers to be in their regions to become a member. I don't know. The way I'm reading this whole thing is now I'm confused as to who's trying to convince who to be a part of WICHI. Should we be convincing the other islands to come on board so that we can get this? Because I guess as it is right now, with only CNMI paying, I guess students from Guam cannot benefit from the only CNMI, as I understand it then. So I'm just, I don't know, maybe the author can clarify and help me to understand better who's trying to convince who in this resolution.
Thank you. I yield to the question. The CNMI is the only participating member of this 16th group. When it was brought to my attention that Guam wasn't participating, but they were a part of that 16th group, that is when I acted through a resolution because that's the mandate of WICHI. Now, would it be beneficial to our island and our government and our people to convince the other islands to join this, to make I guess it would be $32,000 a person if they all join together? Absolutely. But I do think that we can't wait for that. We can't sit there and wait. I think we've waited 2 years now. The WICHI president was just on CNMI giving a lecture in December. And so, this is, I agree with the retiring speaker that maybe we should be sending or transmitting some of our findings and some of our support through these different channels to try and convince them. But I don't think it's a matter of who's convincing who. I just think it's a matter of there's an opportunity for us to take advantage of something, and I think rather than us waiting for someone else to jump aboard to make it more cost-effective for our island, I think maybe we take the lead, because part of this WICHI program is you get 2 board of directors, and I guess the government would then have to work with the CNMI to identify who those board of directors are going to be to represent the 16th spot. So hopefully we can take the lead. And that is the whole vision of this, is Guam would take the lead, and then we would hope the rest follow. But I don't think it's something that needs to be waited on. I think it's something that we can do now before the price goes exponentially higher. And I think this is something that's a win-win situation for everyone. So that's I hope I answered the question. But yeah, he does, following the good Senator Adam made a good point, or maybe we should disseminate this information to the rest of the islands as well.
Is that sufficient, Senator Adam? Thank you very much. Senator Morrison?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to thank the author of this resolution. I just learned a lot about WICHE and was fortunate to learn about it while I was attending the University of Guam. But nevertheless, I'm grateful for the University of Guam to have the programs to allow me to participate and graduate out of the university. However, I want to point out that we should learn from our brothers and sisters in the Northern Marianas on how they make this process very simple. And as I read the resolution, it's clear that we already are members. We are just trying to become active members of WICHE. And when I'm reading through this, it's clear that the territory or Cnmi made it clear that they wanted to join this to benefit their students. It even caused the WICHE president to state that it brought them back to their original roots, returning them to what their original charter called for, and that is to serve the West states and territories. The Cnmi's membership has allowed the students to participate in WICHE student exchange, allowing their students already to enroll, I believe since 2012, in undergraduate, graduate, and professional programs in member states and territories at a deep discount. I guess for the listening audience out there, what we're trying to do is allow our students who have options to participate in these member states and territories within WICHE. And I also see this as the author stated, he's trying to reach a compromise with the forces that be that may having some concerns with this, reaching out to the University of Guam and GCC. I also see that this could possibly also be a return on investment through some reciprocity agreements, or however the membership works, that we do offer professional programs, undergraduate programs. We have one of the best marine labs in the world. And I believe that this could also be an attraction for our institutions, for those in participating in WICHE, to attract those students in their areas to Guam. So it's my hope that the University of Guam, GCC, would also see this as not only an opportunity for students to participate in programs that are not offered in Guam, but also an opportunity and an investment to attract those students in the areas to the programs that they offer. So I thank my colleague, the author, for raising this issue and educating us on this program. And I wish that our students today would, as many of our colleagues stated earlier, that not only take advantage of WICHE and their programs or the student exchange, is that they would use this, take advantage of it, take the discount, but also come back to Guam and bring back those expertise. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Morrison. Any other senator wish to be heard? If not, I will invite the sponsor to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my closing, I just would like to touch on something that I didn't touch on earlier. When you're a member of WICHE, the government can also buy slots into graduate programs. So WICHE offers dentistry, medicine, occupational therapy, optometry, osteopathic medicine, pharmacy, physical therapy, physician's assistants, podiatry, and veterinary medicine, just to name a few that the government, while they're an active member, can buy slots and reserve spots for aspiring students that want to get their master's degree or get a graduate degree. So that's, aside from, it does have a cost associated with it, but then again, if the government can provide that for our students, then I think it's a win-win situation. I just want to thank all my colleagues for the discussion. I want to add Senator Yamashita as a co-sponsor, Senator San Nicolas, Senator Morrison, Speaker Juan Pat, Senator Muñoz, Senator Dueñas, and everyone else, and the rest of the body if need be, Mr. Speaker. But thank you very much. I'd like to send it now to the third reading file.
Hearing no objection. On the amendment for all the co-sponsors, hearing no objection also. So both the amendment for the sponsors and the resolutions down. Senator Winnie-Barnes on your resolution 279.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move resolution 279-32 COR as substituted on the floor, and it's been all passed out to the third reading, and if I can briefly speak on it.
Hearing no objection, please.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'd like to thank the delegation from Saipan and Rota who took the opportunity to come to Guam to present testimony in reference to supporting Resolution 279-32. But I also want to thank that same delegation for giving me the opportunity to personally visit both Rota and Saipan and speak to the leadership on the islands in reference to moving this concept regarding a ferry service or similar vessel forward. From Rota, Mayor Melker Menjola, Senate Vice President Senator Victor Hokuk, who is the representative in Rota, Senator Paul Manglona, Senator Jovita Taimania, and House Representative Teresita Santos. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the folks in the agencies from both Rota and Saipan, from Rota, Martin Minjola, and then from the COTA, the Commonwealth Office of Transit Authority, headed by Mr. Tom Camacho. And I'd be remiss if I also didn't extend my Sizos Masi to Governor Enos and the Senate President of Cnmi and the House of Representatives, Mr. Torres from the Senate and House Rep. Guerrero for sharing their support in this effort, but more importantly for giving me an opportunity to speak to them about this. Mr. Speaker, in recent years, the lack of sufficient affordable alternative inter-island transportation between Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands has been an obstacle that I believe to economic and social development. I want to say the alternative passenger and at least pallet cargo vessels will allow for the rapid transportation of people and goods between the islands at a more affordable rate. I want to say that the lack of passenger and cargo capacity combined with the present high cost of travels and inter-island shipping have been the main obstacles to an expansion of our tourism industry within the region and the inter-island trade and economic development. The added passenger and cargo capacity coupled with the short transit time and decreased costs that ferries and similar vessels can provide, Mr. Speaker, will allow many more people to travel from and to the islands and will allow for the increase of agriculture and industrial production that is dependent upon the existence of adequate transportation infrastructure and logistics. I want to say that the addition of a ferry or similar vessel-based sea route between the islands will especially be beneficial to the promotion of trade between Guam and the island of Rota and expand the tourism market in both islands. It was noted at the public hearing that if anybody in the military were to go via a ferry or a boat to one of the islands, that they wouldn't even have to sign leave, but if they had to go through air transportation, then they would have to sign leave. I want to say that as it stands today, Mr. Speaker, the cost of flights between Guam and Cnmi is roughly the same cost as it is a flight to the Philippines or Japan, and I know you were sharing some of those prices earlier that were at a discounted rate, but the prices of getting an airplane ticket just to the islands is really, really, really expensive. In Rhoda, Mr. Speaker, the cost of basic commodities like rice, sugar, and coffee are almost double what it is here on Guam. I want to share with you that when I asked to buy a case of soda, I thought that, okay, a case of soda here in Guam is, in the commissary is really cheap, but outside is about $8 to $10 a case if at anything, nothing is on sale, but if it's on sale, it can go down to even 7 or 8 outside. But in Rhoda, when the cashier told me, oh, ma'am, it's going to cost you $33 and some cents, I said, are you sure? And she said, yes, ma'am, it's almost, I think, if not $1.50-ish or $1.60 a can. And I was like, I almost said, okay, maybe I'll just take a 6-pack. But, you know, I had to bring Sensuli and, today, and I said, no, let me buy local and support local there, so I bought that case, but I was really, really shocked. Mr. Speaker, this is an issue that is being addressed not only locally, but regionally through the support of the Micronesian Islands Legislatures Association and, of course, the Association of Pacific Island Legislatures, both of which have already adopted similar resolutions. And I want to ask for our colleagues' support on this resolution so that we can reaffirm our commitment to move forward as one Marianas and in the spirit of Ina Famalik. Mr. Speaker, you were at the public hearing, and I want to thank my colleagues who joined me at that public hearing that we had recently. And one of the topics that came up was even the possibility of talking about a roll-on, roll-off, but the possibility of working with auto transportation and what it could do and why wasn't it named here. But if there was anything that struck me in that public hearing, Mr. Speaker, was the talk about trying to get resources for transportation and trying to advocate for bringing not just tourists, but our families and our friends from the islands to and from. And one thing that was talked about by CODA's executive manager, which is Mr. Tom Camacho, was the fact of talking about transportation and the waters in the islands or within the islands, that we can't build bridges and tunnels. So we have to look for transportation as it relates to the Blue Highway. And being able to tap into that resource, Mr. Speaker, being able to talk at a regional level about providing transportation through that Blue Highway, through those blue waters, I'm going to tell you, Mr. Speaker, would be an opportunity for economic diversity, for bringing resources not just to Guam and Rhoda, but everywhere in the Cnmi, and probably even extending out to the other islands within this specific region. So, Mr. Speaker, I said I was going to be brief, so I'll just stop here. I just want to ask my colleagues to please support me in this endeavor and this effort, because I truly believe that with the inaugural meetings that we had with the Marianas Island Legislatures Association and their efforts, and also working closely with the President and the members of APIL from Guam, Speaker Juan Pat, Majority Leader Respicio, who both sponsored the bill with me, but also Senator Duenas, and in their efforts to support this, I just want to say, if this gets passed unanimously, or when it gets passed by this body, we will go into the next journey into making sure that the collaboration comes together and we move forward for this and really tap in to looking into the Blue Highway. So, Sana Maasi, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Munya-Barnes. Any senator wish to be heard on this resolution? Senator Speaker Wampat. Any others after Speaker? Speaker Wampat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of Resolution 279, and I thank, of course, the author for, her work to put this together, and actually meeting with the the delegation from Cnmi and, more important at the time, with the Rhoda community, because they have been actually left out. At one time, there was this ferry between Cnmi, Saipan, and Tinian, and unfortunately, they had to discontinue with that ferry service. The other ferry service that I was really looking forward to was, and had been in operation and was short-lived, was from Honolulu to Maui. And I like for us to, and of course, Rhoda and Cnmi to do further research and to find out what were the reasons for the discontinuance of that ferry service. I know they were allowed not just passengers, they were able to bring in cargo, and as a matter of fact, they're able to even drive their vehicle onto that particular vessel and go to the other islands. And I'm not sure, but that's the reason why I'm saying I'm hoping, I'm encouraging that this discussion, as it continues, that we really look in depth to find out what happened with that discontinuance of the service there. The one thing I did hear, because when you're basically traveling, it's not so much only, and because you're out in the high seas, and in terms of the speed of the vessel, the engine of the vessel, what that would do with the marine life, similar to what it is that's going to happen in Pagan, where they want to go and use it as a firing range, and it's extended the scope of that range, and how even with them having to do an EIS to make sure that the marine mammals are not affected. And I surely don't want something that as good as this to be discontinued for someone to somehow, our big brother out there saying to us, then now we can't do this for whatever reasons are. Because I think this is a great thing that really will connect Guam with Cnmi. It can also take it even further with Guam and throughout Micronesia. So I support this very well, and I'd just like to add one last comment, is that APIL for this year, for its General Assembly, is actually bringing up the main theme of the discussion, which will take place in the Marshall Islands, is air transportation and sea transportation. So this could very well then also be a continuance of this discussion that could hopefully set up this kind of alternative regional transportation. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Any other senator wish to be heard? Senator Tom Adda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I certainly rise in support of trying to get in place some kind of transportation between at least Guam and Rota. Now, during the public hearing, I had asked a question because they kept talking about the fact that they were going to need to do a study regarding this concept itself. There may be certain times of the year when transportation over there may not be available because of rough seas, what kind of demand there might be, and then determine what type of vessel might be appropriate. Now, they did something similar when they were looking at establishing a transportation system between the Saipan and Tinian. And I believe with that they paid, I forget, I believe it was somewhere around $70,000 to do a study. And they're thinking that it's going to cost about $70,000 to do that study for the Guam-Rota transportation link. And so I just want to make clear, in the second resolve on page 2, we say, starting on line 14, it says, resolve that Imina 32 ng Legislatura ng Guam, does hereby on behalf of the people of Guam express its full support for promoting affordable. Now, knowing that a study is going to have to be done, it really wasn't clear, is this going to be a 50-50 venture with Guam paying half of the cost for the study, or are we just saying, how we say, yeah, we support it, go ahead, do it, we'll support it. So I just want to, maybe, it wasn't clear at the public hearing, and maybe if the author would yield the implications for financial support.
Mr. Speaker, yes, thank you for the question. I want to say that in our discussions between ROTA and Saipan, there was a talk about looking at a true public-private partnerships, working with the governments coming together, and with the support of this legislation, with this resolution and the support from APIL and MILA, this will drive the startup of the stakeholders coming together and looking what the commitments would be from then. But in our efforts to look at this concept and what's already being done with the Cnmi from Saipan to Tinian, they're saying that our efforts to showing that maybe we start a pilot project, that we all come together and look at what it's going to cost, but truly looking at the opportunities out there, also engaging on what we can get from federal resources that is out there that can be tapped into once this project or this program gets engaged.
Thank you. Thank you. And Mr. Speaker, given that response, there's really still a lot of variables that need to be looked into. I'm wondering if maybe on page 2, line 15, it may be more appropriate, it may be premature at this point to say that we express our full support, and whatever it's going to take, we're going to get right into it, as opposed to maybe if we were to say that we want to express a sincere interest in looking into this, and then when we come together at the table and find out that, yes, there are federal funds, then at that time we can, then it may be more appropriate at that time to say, okay, now we know what's at stake, then certainly. Otherwise, it may be that, certainly through this resolution, we're saying, yes, we're interested. Invite us to the table and we'll sit down with you and take a look at what all is involved. And maybe after we find what all is involved, we may realize that maybe this is not something we want to get into. So I would then move to make an amendment on line 15 to say, on behalf of the people of Guam, express its interest in promoting affordable alternative energy.
On that amendment, any senator wish to be heard? Senator Munya-Barnes, on the amendment of interest.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, if I may, I'm going to respectfully object to that amendment. In our efforts of working to look at the possibilities of, as oversight chair of tourism, and seeing what we could do to look at economic opportunity and the move for this kind of sea transportation, and looking at what can be tapped into, a commitment was made as a committee to saying that, when we support this, if I get the support from my colleagues, a commitment from this body would say that we would continue to move forward and look at the options that are out there. With that, I gave my full support in being able to facilitate this program moving forward. And for me to say now that, okay, I fully support, but now I'm just going to express my interests, I'm not coming here just half interested. I'm coming here to saying that if this August body gives us that opportunity, I'm going to go further into this journey and commit to facilitating this program moving over, and I will also commit to not leaving any stone unturned to see what's out there. But I got to at least try, Mr. Speaker. And in my efforts of talking to both Rhoda, Saipan, and Tinian, and the engagement that they said with working closely to Guam, and me working with the executive branch through the stakeholders of GRTA saying, yes, this needs to be done, this should have been done, we should have been looking at this. If I have an opportunity to look for resources and engage in new opportunities to bring economic jobs to Guam, but more importantly, to bring families to and from and make that happen, man, I'm going to give it my full support. I'm not going to give it you just 50%. And I'm saying that I'm here for the long haul. I'm here to help facilitate that through. I'm here to make sure that if there are stakeholders that need to come together, if we need to look at the public-private partnership, if we need to look at the commitment of what the government needs to exchange and work on MOUs to that, I'm going to work with that. And maybe not as an oversight chair of transportation, but as an oversight chair of tourism, looking and wanting to tap into new resources and seeing what we could create as far as creating jobs. And that was what was the impetus of what I wanted to work with, and the commitment on sharing and working with the islands, and us coming together as a blue continent, us coming together as one united islands, and our commitment in Mila. We made this commitment. When the Mariana Islands Legislatures Association met, they approved this resolution and almost was assured that we would work on that same effect. And I really, really, really don't want to turn my back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. There has been an objection to the amendment. Any other senator wish to be heard on the amendment? Any other senator wish to be heard on the amendment? Senator Limtiaco.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I definitely applaud the author of the bill or the resolution for her efforts, but you know the mover of the amendment does make a sound case for some and logic behind what does the language entail regarding the full support for promoting the affordable alternative regional transportation between Guam, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands by means of a ferry service or other similar passenger and cargo vessel, and encourages the implementation of a pilot project. So that language, I'm not sure how to interpret that language and whether or not that binds or commits Guam. And I say that because in the retiring speaker's remarks, she mentioned a public-private partnership. And so I'm concerned that on the same lines as the mover of the amendment, is that committing us to anything? And I'm not sure it is. There's obviously no appropriation or no type of money or no commitment that this resolution is proffering, but it begs the question as if there was an economical, if it made economic sense for this service to be provided, the private sector more than likely would have already had a solution for it. And when you go back and you look at some of the comments from the speaker that she had made earlier of the ferry services that were discontinued in Hawaii, they were purely for economical reasons. They couldn't sustain the traffic, and there was no real economic benefit for any of these potential ferry companies to actually make any money doing it. If they can't make any money doing it, they're going to go right out of business like these ones in Hawaii. So I'm not necessarily objecting to anything. I just, if the author would yield to a question and I apologize, I wasn't at the public hearing, but 70,000. The prior speakers had mentioned a certain amount of money just to study it, and I'm wondering if it's kind of the cart before the horse type thing. Maybe we should do this study to determine the economic feasibility of it. and whether or not there's a lot of traffic. The other thing that has me concerned is with the ferry service, and in dealing with the CNMI, are there customs concerns? Will invasive species type of cargo, we talked about cargo, we talked about passengers, so, on the passenger front, will it be treated much like the cruise ships where we would have to station custom officers there? Will the cargo be treated, and I know this may be out of the scope of the resolution, but if the author could just kind of enlighten not only myself, but potentially those listening as to, have those been thought of, and what was the rationale behind how to address those?
Mr. Speaker, if I may, when I was at the meeting in Saipan a week and a half ago, and the concerns that may be risen as it relates to customs and border patrol and all that, they wanted to assure us that there are customs rules and regulations are parallel to what's happening what's in the island. So of course, when it comes to the regulations and what needs to be abided by the waters and working closely with the federal agencies, those laws are parallel and the same. So I want to express for the record again that this was in almost verbatim support of what Guam gave a commitment to the Association of Pacific Island Legislators, working with all the islands, and our commitment as MILA for the Marianas Island Legislatures. And I'm just surprised right now.
Well, I'm surprised too. I didn't realize that we allowed Chinese visitors without visas. So when you say that they're parallel, I'm not sure that that's true. That's a true statement. So I'm just concerned, with if we are providing passenger service and we're trying to grow tourism and bring people into Guam, I'm concerned as to just the customs side of it. And the only reason why I'm concerned is because that just drives cost into the operation. And, there's a lot of mention of economically feasible and alternative low cost. And, and so I'm just trying to understand how the resolution will work. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any other senator wish to be heard on the resolution? Any other senator wish to be on? Tom's. Okay. There's been an objection to the amendment proffered by Senator Tom Adda. All those in favor of the amendment, please indicate by raise. To change from commitment to interest. Senator Adda. Well, no, I thought you were trying to clarify the amendment. On line 25 on page 2, remove full support for in its place interest in promoting affordable alternative regional. All right. Page 2, line 25. I'm 50. I'm sorry. Line 15, in place of full support for, insert sincere interest in promoting. It's clear with everybody? All those in favor of the Adda amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. Amendment fails. On the main motion. Any other senator wish to be heard on the main motion? If not, I'll invite this, Madam Speaker, are you going to be?
On the resolution? Again, I'm
Please.
sorry. Just one thing, I think I want to make a one whereas clause, and maybe legal counsel can see where it would be the most appropriate, but what I wanted to put in is that in the Association of Pacific Island Legislatures in its 54th Board of Directors meeting on Guam on December 4th to the 6th, 2013, that the Board of, that this resolution number 54-BOD-07 was unanimously supported by the APIL delegation of supporting the affordable alternative regional transportation between Guam and the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands by means of a ferry service or similar vessel. And I have the document.
Are
Just
you
make
including a
reference.
whereas or
Yes,
just informing the body?
And, and a whereas? A new whereas, yes, and the legal counsel to determine where it would be most appropriate to put it within the body of the resolution.
On the WAMPAD motion to amend the resolution to include a statement that APIL had adopted a similar resolution.
Yes. And I have the number 54 BOD-07.
And she and legal counsel will write the whereas. Any objection to the inclusion of that amendment? Any senator wish to be heard on that? Hearing no any objection? Hearing no objection. Any other senator wish to be heard on the resolution? On the resolution, if not, Senator Barnes, you're welcome to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank those who spoke in and rose in support of this resolution. I also want to thank the good co-sponsor, Speaker Wanpat, for making sure that the amendment was put in as it relates to the Association of Pacific Island Legislatures' full support with this. But I'd like to know if I can make an amendment, please, if I may, to, on the resolve clause, that copies of the same be thereafter transmitted, and it lists the names of the people to be given, this resolution to be given to. We can add our House of Representatives Delegate Madeline Z. Verdalio.
On the motion to add the name of Delegate Berdalio as a recipient of the resolution, any objection? Hearing none.
And ask that it be moved to the third. Oh, and I do apologize, I'm the delegate of Cnmi, Khalili.
On the additional amendment to add the name of Delegate Khalili, hearing no objection. And on the motion to send the resolution down to voting file, any objection? Hearing none. Mr. Majority Leader? All right, I guess we'll go back on 226. Senator Nicholas to...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Bill 226, for the purposes of restating and which we've worked out with the clerks earlier, we would like to add a new section 2 to the end of the bill on page 13 to take the language, and if we can just have the clerks technically adjust it, but for the references of the body, take the language in Bill 225 on page 4 from lines 23, continuing onto page 5, line 7, and have the exact same language reflected in Bill 226. Based on our conversations with legal counsel, the exact wording of that language will be applicable on 226 because it would be referencing the specific chapter. If you look on Bill 225, page 4, line 23, it says, for the purposes of this chapter. And so having that exact same language in 226 would result in it being okay across the board as far as legal application is concerned. And so my amendment that I could proffer again is on page 13, adding a new subsection 2 that transposes the exact language in Bill 225, page 4, lines 23 through page 5, line 7.
On this Nicholas amendment, to add a new section 2, to transpose the language that was in 225. Any objection? Any senator wish to be heard on the amendment? Any senator wish to be heard on the amendment? Any objection? Hearing no objection. Senator Nicholas, any further amendments? Are there any other senators that wish to be heard on the main motion? Senator Yamashita. After Senator Yamashita, any other senators on the main motion?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to speak on Bill number 226-32. Mr. Speaker, when I first heard that this was being considered and crafted, I really got excited. There was really a sense of hope. We have in previous, certainly way before I got here, the conversation about knowing exactly what we needed to do with DOE, the plans, how to move forward, how to best address facilities. And then once I became a member, we passed Public Law 31-29. And in that, we did talk about the planning for addressing our facilities. We talked about facilities and maintenance. We talked about energy savings. Talked about a 5-year plan. We talked about supporting the Adequate Education Act. And certainly every time DOE comes in here and we talk about facilities, at one point it was Tauling Taitano, who is our superintendent, and then we've had, of course, now John Fernandez here as a committee of the whole, or in their office, or in my office, or in the Speaker's office. We always talk about the need to fund these plans that will help us really understand exactly what needs to be done to all the schools to help them. Certainly GW needs help, but I'll tell you, so does the home of the Pirates, so does the home of the Roadrunners. There are so many public elementary schools. We've been focusing a lot on our high schools, but there are many middle and elementary schools. So this really gives hope to the idea that we will look overall holistically. I certainly appreciate when an amendment was made to ensure that a curriculum was included in the overall plans, because in today's schooling, today's landscaping, that really does make a difference in how we are preparing our kids to be successful in this millennium. So I appreciate the persistence, the determination of the main author of this motion, this bill, in seeing an opportunity and really running with it. Despite all of the concerns and, is it the right timing? She sees an opportunity, she's grabbing it, and she's going to tag it. And for that, I do appreciate. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Yamashita. Any other senator wish to be heard on the main bill? On Bill 226? Madam Speaker, you may close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, one of our colleagues in speaking asked a question, what's next after Simon Sanchez High School? And Bill 226 is really what is next. And because it's going to be similar to what we just did in terms of providing for the repair and renovation of Antolon Middle School, that when you go in there, you'll be able to go and retrofit the whole school to modernize it. And even as old as that school is, the structure is very sound. And similarly, that's exactly what we're finding out with all of our schools, because they're built to be able to withstand typhoons and to withstand earthquakes. And for the most part, a lot of it will be to renovate and to upgrade it. Since I decided to run in the legislature, one of my main goals was always searching, finding ways to be able to find monies to be able to renovate schools, build schools, because I know that that's exactly what we need. And at that time, it was with a larger population of 35,000 school children. And one of the things then in my research has been to try to find some other creative ways. And one such thing, of course, that we used in the government for the very first time was the lease back of the 4 schools. And then the second thing that we did, and unfortunately we never took advantage of it, and that was the QZAP monies, federal dollars of $10 million every year that's offered to Guam and other states and territories to use for construction, qualified construction bonds in which they would be able to pay for the interest and we would pay for the principal. We were very fortunate that at least we were able to take advantage of that last year of money that's available to Guam, and then we were able to use that. And at the time, Gita, said it wasn't possible to do. And then in a conversation I had with Stan Dirks, he said it is possible because it has been done in the mainland, but maybe never in Guam. So we were able to work that, and now we are taking advantage of that QZAP federal dollars then to pay for at least the interest. So the third then other way I realized that although it's relative when we say what is creative, what other alternative measures do we have, and that's also the bridging in this case of BBTs to hold us until the maturity date of the 2013 C bonds. So I just wanted to explain that to our colleagues and those who have asked that question and are wondering, where do we go from here? I think that will be it. And in closing then, because I thank, of course, Senator McCready, who's worked closely as well with the committee and the other sponsors of the committee. And I know I've put him in as a co-sponsor, but all those that he himself had acknowledged who also saw and wanted to find, again, other ways to do exactly what Bill 226 is doing and more. So I'd like to go ahead and ask, and hopefully with their permission, is to list the others that were co-sponsors of 218, and that is Senator Rodriguez, Senator Morrison, Senator Duenas, Senator Mike Limpiaco, Senator Uggan, and Senator Respicio.
On the amendment to add additional co-sponsors,
218.
hearing no objection. On the motion to send the bill down, hearing no objection. Senator Nicholas, Bill 228.
Mr. Speaker, with the indulgences of yourself and the body, I'd like to go ahead and please set aside this until a later
All right,
time
will do.
due to time constraints.
Senator Munya-Barnes on 231.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, I'd like to move Bill 231-32 COR to the third reading file, and it does have a companion bill with 232-32 COR, but I guess I'll speak on 231-32 COR first, please, Madam Speaker. I know there was a switch between you and the Speaker.
Okay, please proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 231-32 COR is an act to rezone lot numbers 22, block number 4, tract 170, West Acre subdivision, Dedido, Guam, from a single-family dwelling zone R1 to a multi-family dwelling R2. This piece of legislation, Madam Speaker, is formally Bill number 168-32 LS, which we had to withdraw due to the bill covered 2 lots that needed to be rezoned, so we had to break it down to rezone each lot independently based on our standing rules. But, Madam Speaker, this bill was introduced at the request of Mr. and Mrs. Uggan, the owners of Lot 22 and Lot 23. The current situation is that the Uggans have houses on both lots. Their residential home is situated on Lot 22. It's with an attached single-family dwelling, and because their homes with the attached 3-bedroom dwellings are separately metered, this places Lot 22 as a non-conforming lot with respect to the zoning status. This, in essence, prevents Mr. and Mrs. Uggan from assessing the equity on their property, and they're just asking that in order for them to maximize the highest and best use of this lot, that it had to be rezoned. So I ask that my colleagues please give it fair consideration. There was public testimony. Mr. Angel Sablon did present oral testimony on behalf of the Uggans, as he is the nephew for them, and he too shared and asked for our colleagues to see if they could support these efforts. Again, Madam Speaker, I just want to note for the record that Bill number 231-32 is a companion bill with Bill 232-32, because when it was first introduced, it was Bill 168, but we had to separate both bills. Senator Miles.
Welcome, Senator. So on the motion, is there anyone who would like to speak on it? There being none, so on the motion to send 231 to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, if I can do for the same, just move Bill 232-32 COR to the third reading, and just want to note that it's the exact same thing as previously noted in 231.
232, a companion bill of 231. Hearing no objections to send it down to the third reading file, so ordered. Speaker Pangilinan here for 235? Where? I didn't. Okay. No, he asked to set that aside because he had another appointment. 235, Speaker Pangilinan, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 235, I'd like to move that Bill 235 that Bill 235 as substituted on the floor be accepted by the body.
And we're getting the substituted
Yes,
motion?
that's being passed out. The major the change really that is occurring, Madam Speaker, in Bill 235 is Bill 235 would have directed the governor to release the reserves from the 2014 Department of Education budget, and it would reduce the reserve from 15% or 10%, as the governor has, to a maximum of 3% for the Department of Education. The release of that would then be directed so that the $4 million would be, approximately $4 million would be dedicated to, or $3 million would be dedicated for the repair of Simon Sanchez. But given what we've done with 235 and 236 with the body moving forward, dedicating money for Sanchez, the bill would then redirect the release of that money to GW High School, Madam Speaker. As you know, if we do have open a Central High School, we have money to pay for the rent at Central High,
but we don't have any money to repair GW. And so the main change in the bill that is offered to be substituted on the floor is to redirect that money to GW High School, Madam Speaker. So that's the explanation of what it would mean if we accepted the bill as substituted on the floor.
Thank you for that explanation. On the motion, is there anyone who would like to speak on 235?
Well, first, the motion to accept
Oh, the
as
motion.
substituted.
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have said that. Yes, please continue. Thank you so much. Yes, please continue. I was listening intently to your discussion.
There's no objection.
No, there's no objection.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as you know, there are many issues regarding the Department of Education and the ability of the Department of Education to be given the money that is appropriated to it by this body as the priority expressed in the allocation of the resources in the annual budgets. Now, we keep hearing, we release 100% of their allotment. Well, if the allotment if the appropriation is being reduced by the allotment process, then Department of Education is not going to get the money it needs, because we didn't budget the request of the Department of Education, and we didn't appropriate to the Department of Education, figuring out that they were going to get the allotment reduced by 15%, which is what happened in 2013. The governor withheld the allotment, the appropriation levels, and reduced it so that he didn't give them the money and the cash by reducing the allotment. And so, even then, Madam Speaker, I still recognize the fact that the administration, in the implementation of the allotment schedule, has used it as a tool to control expenditures for the departments and agencies under its control, and inclusive of the Department of Education. And so what I am proposing, Madam Speaker, is that we cap that allotment or the reserve that the governor is able to withhold from the Department of Education to something more reasonable. $21 million was what was reserved in the allotment process, and we saw what happened. They had to keep releasing the money, but it put DOE in a bind in terms of planning and expenditures out, because they didn't know if they were going to get the release of those budgeted items, the appropriation authority and the appropriation levels that was budgeted by this legislative body. And so we figured and looked at the history of what the Department of Education has been able to lapse without crippling its budget and its operations through the use of some control by the administration. And we looked at it and we figured out over the history that 3% seems to be a reasonable amount that we can allow the governor the flexibility of having him authority over the appropriation level to reduce it through the allotment process. 15% is absolutely devastating, 10% is crippling, and we believe that 3% would be still in deference to the administration's authority to control expenditure through the allotment process, but to a point where it doesn't hinder the effective and efficient use of the resources that have been appropriated by this body to the Department of Education. And so that's one of the items in here, is that 3% cap on the allotment control over the Department of Education. We also are asking the administration that when they release the reserve amount, that when the Department of Education gets that reserve amount, then that $4 million will be used of that reserve that is released to support improvements at Guam, at George Washington High School. The school needs upgrading and improvement, Madam Speaker, and we have no funds identified. And they are, in some instances, as critical as some of the Sanchez improvements that are needed. But we don't have any money to do that. And so we are then directing that $4 million of what is released would go to the George Washington High School for improvements. Now, they were, of course, reviews by the Army Corps and the Evergreen Report that identified in the Evergreen Report, I think, $6 million for a full refurbishment of GW, I think $6.8 million. So we think that the $4 million will go a long ways to doing the critical repairs needed to resolve some of the issues at GW at this time. In addition, Madam Speaker, there are facilities within the Department of Education that are available unused that could house, for example, central facilities for the Department of Education. And, you know, the Department of Education and this government wants to spend $22 million to build warehouses and a central office facility for the Department of Education. And if we have $22 million, I don't think we should be building warehouses and brand-new office space for the central staff. I think we have empty space, for example, at Southern High School, that can be refurbished to accommodate the administrative office requirements of the Department of Education. And so this bill would allow then part of that $4 million to be used by the Department of Education to refurbish Southern High School to accommodate their needs. And if indeed we still have that $22 million that the governor is saying he has and he will make available to build a new central facility for DOE and new warehouses, then let's take that 22 and give it to the schools, because the schools have an identified need of $90 million. And then maybe we don't have to borrow as much money to refurbish it, and we can reduce it by the $22 million that the governor's saying he can pour into the Department of Education over the next several years. So it would allow that, Madam Speaker. And then the bill also, Madam Speaker, would then make the release of this $9 million that is under debate right now. It would direct the Bureau of Budget and Management to release that reserve. So the Department of BBMR can then, or the Bureau, would then be directed to release that $9 million in allotment. And then if the governor still thinks that he doesn't want to do it, then he doesn't have to fund the cash. But we are saying as a body that that money belongs to DOE. They have use for the money. It's critical to their operations, and the allotment should be released so that it can be funded, Madam Speaker. And so this is the gist of Bill 235, Madam Speaker, and I ask that, and I believe that this bill, if passed, would provide the resources necessary to the Department of Education to avoid things like we're seeing today happening when they don't release the appropriation level. They will release an allotment but reduce the appropriation. And what happens? DOE ends up having to pay interest on payment to the retirement fund because they didn't get the money. Because the allotment reduced the release of the cash to DOE, and therefore they're late in making their payment to the retirement fund, and then they have to pay, I think the last time one of the reports was, they had to pay $45,000 in interest to the retirement fund because the allotment reduced it, Madam Speaker, because they did not give them the appropriation that was given by this body as what is being necessary for the Department of Education to function and operate efficiently. So these are the things that if we make these changes as proposed in Bill 235, that it will now allow the Department of Education and BBMR and the governor to follow the law and avoid things like unnecessarily taking $45,000 out of DOE's budget that is critical to its operations. And yes, $45,000 is critical because they have $290 million in need. So every single penny, every single dollar that DOE can keep to fund its operations, to buy new electronic whiteboards, to pay vendors on time, $45,000 is a lot of money, Madam Speaker, to pay for interest that should not have been charged against it had they received the appropriation level. And so when the practice of reducing the allotments causes additional cost to DOE and takes it out of the resources for the education of our children, then that allotment process has to be modified, Madam Speaker. And the reserve power, the power to reserve funds and appropriations to the Department of Education cannot stand 10%. Can't obviously live with a 15% reserve. But we think that 3%, based on the expenditure history of the budget and the ability to bridge gaps during end of fiscal years, is something that I'm willing to say to the governor, you'll still have this authority. I'm not trying to completely neuter the governor in regards to his powers here. I recognize his powers over that process. But when the exercise of that power becomes unreasonable, and it harms the department and it harms our children, then the legislature has to step in and limit those powers. And that's what this bill will do for the benefit of our children and their education. Thank you, and Sidusmasi, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Senator Yamashita, you're recognized on the motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for allowing me the opportunity to speak on Bill number 235-32. I was quickly going over the committee report. I believe I was there, and I just don't recall thoughts to the section 19 on page 4. Madam Speaker, it's no secret that I have been suggesting to GDOE that we shift, we realign. We all know we have those rooms. I have the latest room inventory. We know that when you and I were there, we had 36,000 kids, and our local appropriation was $140 million at that time. Today, we have 31,000 kids, and we're way over $200 million. So it's never an issue of money for me. It's always an issue of leadership and making good decisions. And so when I first suggested that we shift, we realign, it's not a popular topic, but it is a topic that we've done when you and I were both there. I mean, it takes a lot of work, but it can be done. And families are always very reasonable if you give them enough time and you include them. And I had also suggested that DOE Central be located in Santa Rita at Southern High. We know that half of that campus is being probably used for storage, but it certainly isn't being used for classrooms. And the responses to that, to the DOE leadership, was they weren't interested. And so my question, if the author will yield, is in section 19, when it talks about retrofitting the unused buildings and facilities at Southern High to be utilized for DOE Central offices, I'm wondering, did he succeed in getting them to agree and say that they would be open or supportive of this movement?
Senator, do you yield to the question?
Yes, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm relying on the public statements that have been made by the superintendent. When he said that he was moving out to Tizen for the central facility, he said, that's something that's being offered to us as an alternative. And therefore, we really don't want to move. We'd rather not have to pay rent. Well, the governor is saying you don't have to pay rent because he's doing it from the lease and of the lease to purchase. The problem is that the governor has asked that the payment of that be transferred to the DOE budget, so that DOE is going to end up paying that rent. And the superintendent says they don't have money to pay rent. They have money. They would rather take the money and put it into the schools themselves. But if he was given an alternative, then he would rather not use that money and not go occupy and build new space. So the alternative here is Southern High. And so we're presenting him with that alternative, Madam Speaker, and holding him that, yes, you don't have to accept expenditure of $22 million for brand new central facilities because there is an alternative. And they said that they don't have the money to retrofit Southern High School. This will provide them the money to retrofit that, and that can now accommodate their move, Madam Speaker. So it really, places it on his lap in terms of that decision. And is he really serious when he says, if I'm given an alternative where I don't have to take money out of my budget to pay for administrative offices, then I'm going to do that because my priority are the children. Well, this will give him that opportunity to live up to that public statement and live up to that commitment and comment. But no, I did not get a, yes, I will do this. He's saying, give me an alternative and I will do it, and this is the alternative.
Senator, was he able to answer your question? Yes. Thank you. Is there anybody else like to speak on the motion? Can I ask the Vice Speaker to come up here?
Madam Speaker, you're recognized on the main motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I stated earlier in another bill, is that, I love listening, of course, to the chairperson of OFB, and I learn a lot, and I've learned something else again, and it has triggered a thought in terms of a conversation that several of us here had actually had with the governor. And one of the things that the governor basically said that in about 6 months or 5 months from now is that the legislature has to make a decision in terms of what it is that we want to do for the new buildings of warehouses and a brand new building for a central office, and even to address for a couple of years for the charter school. And what is being done here is, I believe, in the right direction, and I support it. I am wondering, I'm thinking out loud now here for my colleagues to even think along with me and see whether would it be appropriate to do this, because I know we have to make a decision, like I said, in 5 months, and if we're looking at then the availability of these monies to use then to go and, fix GW, and that's great. Retrofit GW and renovate GW, I think that's great. We all know, we've discussed this several times, and GDOE is aware is that there's the 5,000, or building 5,000, I think, or 7,000, 5,000, that right now is underutilized at Southern High School. And it was housing a lot of furniture that they had received at one time from McCool School that just basically sat there and got ruined by the elements and ended up just going to our landfill. And we've always been saying this, and I think that this might be the avenue in which the legislature would be making that policy decision then, is that underutilized schools actually then should be, in this case now, retrofitted so that then, yes, we've always said that's a possibility of moving GDOE into some of our facilities, our school facilities that are underutilized. As our senator from Tamuning, and of course who used to be at the Department of Education at the time, was even now it's a deputy superintendent, but a deputy director, knew that we had close to 36,000 school children, and now we're having only 30 to 31,000. So just think that where the shift has gone, and therefore emptying out, really not totally, but vacating a lot of classrooms in many of our schools. So, and in the public hearing, we had asked the superintendent, and even in a letter that I had to the superintendent and to the governor, is that we need to think outside the box as well, and that we need to not be afraid to do some restructuring and reorganizing the structure or format of our schools, that we're so used to K to 5 now, and then 6 to 8, and then 9 to 12. But there's always the possibility of having even K to 8. You can even have, K to 12. Of course, it's much smaller. Every time you build a new school, you need to suit up that whole school with everything in the building, including the human resources. And in the budget request that came, that was taken into consideration. Same number of students, just being shifted. However, we now have to fill it up with teachers and nurses and counselors and assistant principals and school aides. I mean, you name them. Everything that you would have in school would all now, we need to hire a lot of new individuals to put them in this new school. So, but some of these could be, addressed. I know that they were talking about $22 million even to build these new facilities, and I think as an alternative to this, and I don't know whether this is appropriate here, to actually put an amendment then that to address at least the issues of DOE Central School, the central office and the warehouse, that they really look at, like for example, in this one case that's here in the bill, is the central unused offices and facilities or buildings to go to the existing Southern High School facility, and then to further find other schools that could be use the vacant classrooms, then possibly, or even portions of the campus to be used for the warehouses, then so that we would not need to actually move forward and having to, again, in this case, now try to go out and build additional warehouses and central buildings. So I'm not sure how, and I'm not sure, of course, if the author is willing even to go to that extent, or whether maybe it's a separate bill that we have to do all together. But I'm just saying that when you look at what we're looking at to build a building, just to build it, we have the money outright. It'll be like $2 million for an office building, for a warehouse. We're looking at about $800,000, and they're looking at two warehouses, $806,000, depending, of course, on what the structure of that facility will be. But that's just numbers that I was able to extract from the packet that came to us with a breakdown of the payment, the annual payment, in which if we're going to go out to do exercise this purchase agreement and the option to lease, and with all of the amendments that were agreed to. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Any other senator wish to be heard on the main motion? On the main motion? Any senators? If not, Senator Pangilinan, you will invite you to close.
Thank you, Senator Smasi. Mr. Speaker, and with the switch in seats, Madam Speaker now. Madam Speaker, I think that the issue of the June deadline that was given to us by the governor with regards to the purchase and the new construction, I think we need to deal with that on a separate issue. And with all three issues combined, we are sending a request to the bond council that what does that impact on the debt ceiling? And we have to think about these things because it is an increase. The construction cost that you were looking at also included the property. So the cost of those facilities, when they identified them in that, could be much less given the fact that now we don't have to buy the property. And part of the cost of that was the purchase of the property. So it can really decrease those costs if we were to build them on existing government land that is used by the Department of Education. The Department of Education runs a central warehouse in Pt. At this time, and they may have additional space there in order to be able to just build a new warehouse there. Why go buy property in Pt. and then build the warehouse? So I think those questions will be asked as we move forward on that issue. But again, this provides, if they're determined to move GW or half of GW to the Tizen facility, then that leaves GW still in need of repair and with no money to do it. And I think this will provide that resource. And again, this then also with the capping on the allotment reduction and reserve imposition on the Department of Education's appropriated budget by this body will ensure just greater ability of the Department of Education to manage its finances and to avoid unnecessary expenditures such as what we're seeing today under this 10% reserve and the 15% reserve of last year, not having enough money to make timely payments that results in interest costs that really is taking the resources away from our children in our classrooms. So I think this will help fix some of those problems, Madam Speaker, and I ask my colleagues' support of this piece of legislation. Thank you, and to this Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Speaker Penguin. So on the motion to send 235 to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. Senator Yamashita on 236.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I ask that Bill number 236-32 be placed in the third reading file, and I ask to be able to speak to it.
You may proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill number 236-32, as substituted by the Committee on Aviation, Ground Transportation, Regulatory Concerns, and Future Generations, is an act to add a new subsection to Chapter 3, Title 16 of GCA relative to the authorization of the Department of Revenue and Taxation to outsource the driver testing requirement for certain commercial motor vehicle driver's licenses. Madam Speaker, you will recall that last term in the 31st Guam Legislature, this body addressed the long wait to get driver's licenses in Class A, in the vehicles that most of us drive. And at that time, I recall Senator Palacios sponsored and got passed a measure that allowed for revenue and tax to pay for Saturday work to address the 6-month wait. And then eventually, this body supported a measure that became Public Law 31-182. And what 31-182 did was it had DRT remain in full authority of the road testing for those of us in Class A in personal vehicles, and allowed them to develop the rules and regulations to allow private companies who met certain standards as determined by motor vehicles in revenue and taxation to do the road test. And we already know that the written test was already outsourced, and in fact, University of Guam does that in their international programming. It used to be called Continuing Ed, but that name has changed a few times, and now it's international programming, and I can see her face, I can't recall her name, but Rita Edwards used to do it, and now there's a new administrator there. But so we went from the written test being outsourced to the road test in Class A. And at that time, the 6-month wait was compelling enough for the last term's legislature to agree to it. And there was a lot of conversation. And today, Revenue and Taxation is very happy in the public hearing. They're very happy to say that the 6-month wait has now become 5-day wait at Revenue and Taxation. And as well, the outsourcing is with 5 driving schools. It's with Signs and Signals, with Guam Public Safety Educators. It's with Safe Start. It's with Tender Loving Care, and it's with UB Safe. And if you'll recall, the measure that we passed capped it at 5, that only 5 companies shall be allowed to partner with Revenue and Taxation. In talking to them, we know that they continue to go out there and audit to track the data. The private companies are helping them know how to track this data, passage rates, accident rates, and the sort. Well, as soon as this measure got passed, the phone started ringing and the emails started coming, and they said, well, how about us? And the us that we're calling were those with commercial vehicles in classes B, C, D, and G. And the commercial vehicles really are, in our current statutes, they're called chauffeur licenses. No one really can tell me why we call them chauffeur licenses, because it doesn't mean they drive people around, but that is simply the term that is used in current statute. And so these particular particular classes, they represent weights of trucks. There's different weights from B, C, D, and then G is minibuses, and I believe it's D is taxis. The only class that we're not addressing are motorcycles. We decided that we're not touching that. What this measure does, it has evolved, as most measures do. Originally, we wanted to not only outsource the road test for our commercial vehicles, but we also wanted to address reciprocity. If anybody from the United States was coming who had already already gotten a license by certain national standards, then they shall be able to drive trucks here on Guam. But that conversation opened up some serious concerns, such as revenue and tax is no longer a part of a database that has them privileged to the information. And so we need to take care of certain issues before we do that. Madam Speaker, Bill 236 says that revenue and taxation shall come up with rules and regulations. They shall be authorized to outsource up to 3 private schools out there to do the road testing of our commercial vehicles. And they have full authority. It'll be up to them to decide who will be authorized. They will continue to audit to see how it's going. I believe that this really will, again, strengthen our small businesses out there. It will certainly help the businesses that come to Guam that want to, who are involved in trucking and in moving products and produce. It will help drive the economic development. We know of one business out there right now who currently does this, and if this gets passed, this would allow for them to outsource 3. I've had extensive conversation with the president of Guam Community College, Mary Okada, and she has invested in equipment that will test trucks, and she looks forward to partnering with whatever companies are out there who shall want to and desires to. So, Madam Speaker, again, this measure is almost a companion bill to Public Law 31-182, and it extends it from Class A to Classes B, C, D, and G. Revenue and Taxation supports it. Their concerns were with the reciprocity language that we have since removed, and they look forward to addressing rules and regulations, taking it through the processes that we know we have to, that has to go through in order to do this. And certainly the truck companies were all very supportive. Their wait time at this time is 6 months. And then if for some reason they miss their appointment, it's very possible that it's another 6-month wait. And so it could be a whole year wait. And we know that that certainly hampers their business. And so they look forward to this bill being passed and supported, that they really believe will help them get on with their business of trucking and driving. So I look forward to the conversation on the floor, Madam Speaker, and I ask colleagues to consider supporting this measure. Thank you.
You're welcome. On the motion, Senator McCready.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I certainly rise in full support of this piece of legislation, and I thank the author for having the foresight to think of this and to hopefully help in the process of this industry. As I read through the bill on page number 2, I just wanted to offer, I would hope that the author would yield to a question, and I'm thinking that on page 2, line 11, where it says the DRT Division of Motor Vehicles may contract up to 3 business entities. I would wonder if the author would be open to expanding on that and be more specific with the businesses that would then qualify for such licenses that they would be giving. If so, I would like to, maybe consider.
Senator, do you yield to the question?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Speaker, that the particular businesses, who they will really be driven by the rules and regulations that are developed by Revenue and Taxation. So it's really up to them. What kind of businesses shall do it? For example, for the Class A, it was real specific that those who provide the teaching cannot be the same ones who do the testing. Mm-hmm. So really, the rules and regs will define those particular business entities. It'll be up to the motor vehicle professionals and Revenue and Taxation to determine that.
Senator, you're satisfied with the question? Thank you. So, is there anybody else who would like to speak on the main motion? Senator Ada, you're recognized. Comment.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of Bill 236-32. I think this bill, of course, is being proactive. And when the first similar bill was introduced, when it was being discussed, it was actually in anticipation of the kind of backlogs that might occur for individuals wanting to get tested for a trucker's driver's license, for example, since it was anticipated there'd be a demand for truck drivers and to be able to respond to the military buildup. Well, that did not happen, but we know that it's going to happen, and there will be an increase in the demand. The other thing, though, is that it's important to note that by outsourcing the road test examination, it is not taking the Department of Revenue and Tax, their Division of Motor Vehicles, out of the picture with respect to road tests. All it really does is it changes their level of responsibility, and the bill basically recognizes that, let's face it, they're not going to get an increase in budget to be able to increase their staff, to put more inspectors out there in the field. And so the role that now the Division of Motor Vehicles will have will really be one more of quality control, where they will be able, where these people who are actually trained to conduct the road tests can actually make spot checks to these companies that are authorized to be able to conduct the behind-the-wheel road test to see if, in fact, they are conducting the tests properly. And so you go out there and you spot check, and they're basically playing the role of quality control. Contrary to what one might think, that we're taking them out of the picture, we're really not. We're just basically utilizing the limited manpower that Division of Motor Vehicles has to play a different role. I do have one concern, though, as I was looking at this, and that is the department on page 2, line 15. It says that the Department of Revenue and Tax shall, within 180 days from the effective date of this act, develop and transmit to the legislature rules and regulations that establish provisions to include, but not limited, the qualification criteria of testing entities. And of course, so we give them 6 months to develop the rules and regs, and then it comes down to the legislature, and I guess the way rules and regs, they come down here and they either sit for 90 days and lapse into then become official rules and regs, or if someone objects to it, then it has to be pulled out. We conduct a public hearing and all that. So conceivably, these rules and regs won't come into play for 9 months. So I would like to make an amendment and change line 15 there to read that the DRT shall, within 60 days from the effective date of this act, come up with the rules and regs, and transmit that to the legislature.
No objections to the amendment? The amendment was to, on page 2, line 15, is to reduce the 180 days to 60 days from the date that this becomes effective, to develop and transmit to the legislature rules and regs. And so in making that amendment, I'm just thinking that, 60 days is really not a short time period, because basically
Division of Motor Vehicles would already have the procedures as to, when I go out there, conduct a road test, this is what I look for, check, check, check. So then, that's going to be part of the rules and regs. Probably the only new thing that they're going to have to work on, and it might take them a little bit of time, is the criteria, developing the qualification criteria for the testing entities, that the instructors are, for example, the instructors are going to have to be licensed, have to basically maintain a license in whatever category that they're going to be testing. You know, that instructor must not have had any kind of convictions or whatever. So that, I think, is going to be the new piece that they're going to have to work on, which I think, you know, they can do within that 60 days. Otherwise, everything else as to what would constitute a pass or a fail in a test would basically is something that they're already doing now. Somebody is
Senator,
making
can
an
you please,
amendment to the amendment.
Senator, wait. Senator, Speaker Pangilinan, can you please share? Speaker, can you please share on the mic? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And in listening to the author of the amendment, you know, and seeing what needs to be done, because this is not the first time. We did it with the regular driver's test. So we know what those are already. RevTax worked through them, worked through that process. And in terms of, you know, now doing it for the commercial drivers, it's almost as is, okay, so in the driver's test, it was, you know, a licensed instructor by this entity. So you just have to find the comparable entity for a commercial instructor and fill in that blank and switch it out. But everything else will remain the same. So, you know, 30, 45 days, 60 days, I think is generous. I don't think it's onerous. And I think they can even survive. I mean, they can do it in 30 to 45 days. But if 60 is okay, it's okay. But I'm convinced that this is a good thing, and that the faster we do it and the quicker we do it, the better service we'll be providing to our community. And Revenue Tax can then go and concentrate on the other areas that they feel they have lack resources in. So that's really my thoughts on the amendment.
Oh, but so with that, with your thoughts, then you're not offering an amendment to go that lower?
Leave it to the author. If he's,
Okay.
you know, he convinced me it could go to 30, put it that way.
Okay. Thank you very much. Back to the mover of the amendment, unless there's nobody else to speak. Senator Tom Adat, then
I think I'm a little bit more conservative, and I'll stay with the 60. And of course, nothing to prevent them from coming in 30. I mean, you know, so kind of like, what was it? Yeah, promise a long time and then have them come in short. Okay, so I think 60 days is
so within 60 days, it could mean even earlier. So on the amendment, no objections, so ordered. Do you still have the floor? Is there anything else, Senator?
That's it, Madam Speaker, and with that, I think the needs, I think this would be very helpful for many of those folks who are looking for jobs and have the potential to be able to be truck drivers and not have to wait the long periods of time. And so I think this certainly would be very helpful, and it's certainly being proactive in anticipation of the military buildup demands. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. So on the motion to send 236 to third week, I'm sorry, on 236, you want to speak on the motion?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just have a quick concern. It's clear that the author of the legislation has addressed from previous measures that were put in place of outsourcing several testing or processes that address drivers' examinations, and also address the feasibility that it does work, or outsourcing of this service does work, and the access to our citizens. However, I was just trying to catch up on some research and see how this worked in the past, and my concern is there measures, I know the previous speaker mentioned that the revenue tax will still be clear that you have to carry out and oversee these services or providers that, and of course, they will have rules and regs in place. My question is, or my concern is, maybe the author can clear this up, what measures are in place that would outsourcing would not increase the cost of these services to our people? I'm not sure, even though revenue tax is addressing a fee structure to a AAA process, but at the same time, because I'm sure the demand may be greater and it may drive up costs, are there measures in place that address ensuring that the cost does not run up on our people?
Senator, do you?
Thank you very much. I think the best way perhaps to address that question of price is really to say that the market will drive it. That the notion of competition, the notion of quality will determine who's going to go where. Right now, as I said, we only have one company on island that we are aware of that does the testing, but we're hoping with this, more business will be encouraged or motivated. And then I think that's where we'll just see that the competition and capitalism and the free marketing drive that. And I think if anything gets really incredibly high, the people won't go there. So I think we'll be fine. Okay. Thank you.
Senator, are you satisfied? Okay, thank you. So is there anybody else? I don't want to miss anyone who want to speak on the motion of 236. There being none, then, so on the motion to send 236 to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. So, senators, if you don't mind, I understand that we're going to publicly receive then the documents from DOA, so we will recess until tomorrow morning at 9.